Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Weigh-In, part of your British Boxing Blog podcast intake. Me and Andrew here, Stephen and Andrew, as always, just killing a bit of time on a bit of a chat on a Saturday afternoon during lockdown, just talking about all things fight announcements, basically reacting to Matchroom's announcements through the week, Frank Warren's solitary announcement, and some questions as well from Twitter followers mainly. So yeah, good to be here as always. Andrew, you well?
Aye, not too bad, mate. Not too bad, as you say. It's Saturday. I've been working from home this week, so every day is an absolute blur for me. So trying to work out what's probably the hardest part of my week.
That tells
yeah, like obviously we've got a lot of reaction to cover with. There's a lot of we've gone from sort of famine east in terms of the boxing that's been announced and what's coming up. Matchroom have delivered with a few dates, and most of the questions, to be honest, relate to those, but just talking off here, we'll get the questions interacted with and done and dusted first, rather than sort of leaving them till last and tagging them on at the end. I think chronologically they work because a lot of the questions, understandably, are regarding boxing and whether it's safe to come back, and then we'll react specifically to each card by card. Do you reckon?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sounds good.
So first one up, we've got Sean Rice says, controversial, but have Matchroom made enough effort to get some of their marquee fighters out? Plenty of fighters sat going stagnant and could argue not many of them have developed under Matchroom. Warrington, Liam Smith, Josh Kelly, etc. Obviously, a couple of them are now set to feature in the next month or so, next couple of months.
Yeah.
But it's a point you've talked about previously, and I've seen a few people discussing on Twitter recently that, like, this debate about how many boxers have gone from Frank Warren to Eddie Hearn. Supposedly that step up, if you were looking at it from like a transfer point of view, going to arguably the bigger club, but for their individual careers, how many of them have actually like really pushed on and sort of had a better career with Matchroom? I mean, we'll talk about Warrington and Kelly coming up, but Liam Smith is one of those you listed, seems like 6 months ago, probably even like maybe even longer, like that haven't fought during lockdown yet and haven't really kicked on under the Matchroom banner.
Yeah, there's loads of them, and it seems to be like the older names that I just can't get dates at the minute, like the older sort of more established fighters. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that it did seem to be like a bit of a shift in Matchroom sort of, I guess, policy, and that's they're finding it easier to get you, I don't know, like maybe these smaller names, you sort of, like I said, like Marku and Ryan Charlton, people like that. Maybe he's finding it easier to get them dates than it is like, it seems, than your Callum Johnsons or your Liam Smiths. I don't know. Again, like, it's hard without knowing every side of it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've listened to both sides. I've listened to like Eddie Hearn's side, and, for example, like Joe Gallagher's side, and just guessing it's all about meeting in the middle, really, isn't it? Like, you don't really know what's being offered and stuff, but it is a shame that there's a lot of fighters, like, top of my head, like, I can list, Liam Smith, Callum Johnson, even Ricky Burns is still active. Do you know what I mean? Still hasn't retired, nothing.
He was one I'd seen previously when there was the discussion about the sort of the going from Frank Warren. Like, obviously, Burns was two-weight world champion under Frank Warren, and then has made that move across the Matchroom, but almost done it maybe a bit too late. Like, Hearn's got him decent fights, and Burns isn't necessarily the same fighter that he once was. And I think you could probably argue William Smith, he's gone over as a former world champion, but realistically, what can Eddie Hearn do with him?
Yeah.
Going to sort of build on that and improve on that. Like, Frank did brilliantly with Liam Smith, getting him to that world title, and got him a couple of big fights that he's obviously not been successful in, like Canelo and Munguia. But if Hearn were to put him in a similar fight against the world champion at super welterweight, then potentially, like, it could be more of the same. Smith would go in as a big underdog against most of the top fighters in the division. So what does he do? Does he keep him ticking over? Is Smith in a position where he's earned well, so he can maybe afford to be a bit more picky and choosy with some of the opponents? And I think what you mentioned there is with the Joe Gallagher situation, obviously represents Smith as well as Callum Johnson, but it's hard to sweep all of the boxers under the same rug.
Yeah. It's
cross the metaphor in there, but I think the circumstances got to be looked at individually. What is the boxer wanting from a fight in terms of the opponent, in terms of the show, in terms of the purse, like the whole package? What is he prepared to offer? Is he playing hardball because there isn't necessarily the money there? Or some of the bigger names, like a Billy Joe Saunders, happier to sit out and wait until they get that one mega payday rather than risking taking a riskier fight for less money? It's hard to put your finger on. I know Saunders commented, hadn't he, saying like that he didn't really want a competitive fight. I don't know if that's verbatim and that was exactly what was said, or if that's just a sort of taken out of context. But he's obviously like, he fought Martin Murray, and it was like, well, no one really deemed that a competitive fight. But if he's getting the same money to fight, like not necessarily Canelo, but to fight another good name like an Andrade or someone, you can sort of understand from the boxer's point of view. I said, well, actually, no, like I've made a few million anyway over my career. I'll sit on that and I'll wait and I'll wait it out.
It's funny because like lockdown boxing has been kind to some and cruel to others, and I don't know, like it's hard to get your head around. Like if you're say Macaulay McGowan and you fought twice, or you're like, Chris Smith's got another date, and people like that, and people like Ted Cheeseman's now got another fight in. You know, some people are getting the dates, and it just seems others aren't. Whether that's other more established other names who are still maybe looking for the same money they were pre-lockdown or something, or I don't know. Like it's honestly, without speaking to individual fighters, it's hard to like get your head around it. And yeah, you mentioned marquee names, but who are the marquee names now? Like Joshua had a fight during, last year during the lockdown sort of coronavirus period. Like Shabwati had one, maybe. Callum Smith got out there towards the end. Billy Joe Saunders. So big names are fighting. Do you know what I mean? Like some big names are getting fights. There is others for whatever reason, like well-established names that have missed out basically the whole of 2020. And
and I think if you look at, like we've mentioned there, the sort of, if you think of marquee, not necessarily the names, but the fighters that of either currently world champions or have been world champions and have mixed at that level, then obviously they're the ones that by and large will have earned more over the course of their careers. So let's not risk it. Normally those sorts of names probably fight twice a year if we're lucky anyway. So like it's not been that much difference. It's been like one or two fights fewer for them than we would have seen anyway. But they're maybe not as hungry to get in the ring in the sense of they can if they want, if the fight's there, if it's the right opportunity. Whereas someone like a Ted Cheeseman, you've mentioned, Macaulay McGowan, like these guys lower down the pyramid. If they don't fight, they don't get paid, and they're going to struggle to survive. So like they're taking risks. They're the ones that maybe when we had the fight camp concept of no easy fights, however seriously you take that catchphrase, whatever, but like they're the ones where you think, right, well, like if Cheeseman didn't take the Eggington fight, like what was there for him? Was there a fight there? And as a promoter, you can afford to maybe take the hard line with those guys more so than bigger names, because you can say, well, right, like, if you don't fight, you don't earn, you're not on, like, if you don't take this fight, you're not getting out, there's not a chance for you. Whereas obviously, like, if AJ didn't fight Pulev, mandatory politics aside, like financially, that's not going to have made that much difference to him.
I think since Sean asked the question, then you mentioned two names there, Josh Warren and Josh Kelly, who've got dates, who secured dates. Josh Kelly's had this on-off saga with Avanesyan, which finally has another date, and must be last chance saloon now for this fight. So God, everything crossed that goes through. Josh Warren's got a date, which we'll come to in a bit. So there's big names getting the fights. Like
I think they're getting the fights, and to be honest, like Warrington, again, we'll talk about more details. I don't want to jump ahead, but like he's one that I think the move to Matchroom has massively disappointed so far. And even with the announcement of his upcoming opponent, you could still say that is the case.
I
think he's been caught in a bit of no man's land, moving that jump between promoters. There's often a sort of stalling momentum there. Like you have your first fight in a Matchroom card, and it's like just in the ring, like the cobwebs off, and sort of maybe a bit of a freebie, and then you expect him in with a big fight. But it's throwing COVID as well, and it just adds to that frustration from the boxer's point of view.
No, absolutely. We'll come to that. We'll look at each fight, each big main fight on the cards, like sort of individually. So might as well just do in chronological order. But
yeah, before we do, just a couple of others sort of in general about boxing returning. And Joe Box on Twitter and Asian Boxing asked something similar. Joe Box said, the experts are saying that the second wave of the virus will be peaking in mid-Feb. So do you think it's a bit premature for British boxing to be supposedly starting back up again on the 13th of February? Obviously, we know that's now confirmed as the case. And Asian Boxing said, is there a backup plan if the government cancels sport in the UK?
It doesn't look, my gut instinct is probably no, it's not too early, because if football and say horse racing are like setting the precedent, then you know what I mean? Like, then why shouldn't boxing be classed as an elite sport, and why shouldn't that continue? They've obviously been signed off. It's obviously, been checked off, medical staff at events and stuff like that. Why it was sort of cancelled in January, I don't know. But the Premier League,
going to be my next question to you. Like,
the Football League, the Conference North is limping on. Like, Gateshead's got a game today. Do you know what I mean? So, even lower down the football pyramid's limping on. Football all around Europe sort of clinging on. Like, football in this country's clinging on. Like COVID outbreaks at multiple Premier League clubs now. Yet it's still going along. Horse racing's never gone away since it came around last time. I think it was one of the first sports back. Continued. I'm sure they have the same logistical things as boxing, really, that you're going to need ambulances there, especially jump racing. Do you know what I mean? Medical staff.
This is it. There's differences between, I think, the nature of obviously those sports. In terms of football, like a club could be several players down, like West Brom today, missing a couple. Who tested positive. Whereas if you're a boxer, then someone in your camp test positive, that fight's off completely for you. Whereas obviously, like, football teams can use the squads and personnel and get by. But the main sort of reason that was floated, and again, it's probably important to mention, this wasn't specified in the board's statement. It was speculation and people reading between the lines that they didn't want to take any staff away from the NHS. They didn't want to put any unnecessary strain on them. And it comes back down to that argument of what's essential and what's not, because you can argue that any sport, whether elite or not, it's entertainment. It's not an essential part of life, but for those involved and those earning from it, then it's their job, it's their income. But I don't think enough has changed for this U-turn from the board to suddenly be to justifiably say, right, well, it wasn't okay middle of Jan, it's now okay now. Nothing's changed in the wider world other than the fact that a couple of high-profile promoters have come out and said, well, we're going to be putting shows on regardless of whether the board's up and running and sanctioning them or not. There's other avenues available to us. And I think that's maybe forced their hand a little bit.
But then on the flip side of that, why was, say, boxing okay in this country on, I think it was Friday, the 18th of December 2020, when Peters fought Richards for the British title? So why was it okay then, but it then wasn't okay in the whole month of January, but then it is again in February? So
yeah, exactly.
Like, we had boxing all the way through in the States, Canelo, Luke Campbell, early January.
I don't know whether they're linking back to that second wave, whether they've tried to preempt that and sort of put plant the seeds almost early so that people are a bit more used to it, and they may be expecting football and some other walks. Obviously we're back in a full lockdown for what that's worth now. They may be sort of trying to get ahead of the curve and be decisive, which you sort of respect, but the fact that they've changed changed their mind so quickly without anything really happening in the meantime, as I say, other than obviously we're talking Matchroom in today's podcast, Eddie Hearn coming out and saying we'll look to go abroad if that's the case. And I think the board have backed down essentially and sort of highlighted again that the dynamic of that relationship, the power lies with the promoters, because they have other options available. They can go to different what's the word, locations, but what I mean, the different sanctioning bodies. Obviously in America they've got the different. It differs state by state, doesn't it? So some states in America won't allow boxing, but then others still could. And whereas obviously the UK is all one region, one umbrella, all grouped together under that umbrella of it. But it highlights, as I say, for me, that the promoters are the ones with the power because they've got the big names, they've got the boxers, and whether it's actually fought under the British Boxing Board of Control or not, it's arguably irrelevant. And
I know.
I'm a bit of a traditionalist. Like, I like to see fighters go the sort of area level and then the British level and work for a European and then a world title. But we've talked about how fighters and promoters navigate the way around the domestic scene quite often now, and it seems to be the modern way. So for me as a fan, like, if it meant the best fights were happening, but obviously as we've seen in the past with Hay and Chisora, like under a Luxembourg boxing license, like, it makes no difference. You don't care whether it's the British Boxing Board of Control giving the okay and signing it all off, or if some private company comes in and does it. It makes no difference.
I just think, like, I don't know, if football is the precedent in this country, and like I get it is the national game, and you're involved in boxing, and you've seen football, like, as I say, limp on and really cling on to this. You know, like, there's been times in the last few weeks where we've chatted in our groups, be like, football must be on the brink, and you know, it keeps going. And like, if I was involved in boxing, I'd be knocking on the door. Whether you agree it's morally right, whether you're like afraid of COVID, or you're still sensitive to COVID, like, not afraid, but like you're looking ahead, oh, February's going to be the peak and this and that, and like, I don't know. I just think if I would, whether it's morally right or wrong, I would be knocking on the door. If it was boxing, I'd be like, we want to get up and going. We've got a business model. We've got this. We can do this. We need fighters. Like, it's still one of the most popular sports in the country. And if football and horse racing is your precedent and they can continue, if I was boxing, I would be arguing, like, why not us? Which they obviously have, and they've got their own way, and they're back in February. And I think, as going on to, will sport be cancelled in this country? I just think the answer is no. Where there's money involved, like there is in football and horse racing and boxing, you know, I just can't see it being cancelled at this point. I think
if it does, though, like, the question we mentioned in capital, like, massive if, obviously it's a huge if, but if it did, like, do you see boxing then thinking, right, well, actually, we'll take it like private, we'll go elsewhere? Obviously, the UFC is the main comparison, and there's the big comparison between UFC as a promotional entity rather than the whole sport of MMA, so you can't compare it directly to boxing. But, like, could Matchroom perhaps take it to a fight island?
I think only Matchroom could.
You know what I mean? Somewhere where they could put it on. I
think only Matchroom could. I can't see Frank Warren and BT doing that. I just can't. I just don't think it suits them, or it is them. Eddie here, possibly Matchroom could add, because they've got the contacts out there. They've done stuff in Saudi before. They've got the DAZN platform if needed as well, and you know, they're well in the States and stuff. I don't know.
How easy would that be, though, to do with non-Matchroom fighters involved as well?
I think it's a massive logistical headache that I wouldn't even like to try and get my head around it. Maybe they could do 1 or 2 dates or one big stacked date. I don't know, but I just think we're possibly past the point now of sport getting cancelled. That's not me being naive to COVID, and I know it's an absolute shitstorm and a horrific situation at the minute, but I keep referring back to football being the precedent, and that has limped through December and January. And I think if that was going to go, it could have went when Newcastle had the outbreak, or City, Villa, whatever. Like, you know, and still games getting cancelled every week now and rearranged, but somehow it's still going. And there was a time when I think the Premier League had meetings and stuff, and they decided, no, we're not going to do the circuit breaker and have 2 weeks off, or scrap the FA Cup or whatever. So I think sport is just going to limp on throughout the whole thing. Hope things get better and continue. So if that's the case, and they've obviously, you know, as I say, it's obviously been signed off government-wise and health board-wise and stuff like that. Then I heard murmurings in the background, like, you know, are you going to cancel this? Am I safe to now announce and book in these dates? And boxing, and they've done it. Matchroom's done it. Frank's released 1 date as well. So if they're good to go, whether it's morally right or wrong, it's been signed off, and here we are.
Yeah, I think that's the point now, that regardless of the whys and the wherefores, like, it has been signed off and the dates have been confirmed.
Yeah.
And we saw during sort of the previous run of shows that there were certain fights called off at the last minute because of COVID, and like, if the precautions are taken, so everything's secured and locked down, then maybe that you just lose one fighter from a bill, you lose one fight from a bill, or there's a replacement in there. Like, there's ways around it. And obviously, they've showed the sort of provisions in place to make sure the shows go ahead, even if they're at a reduced capacity in terms of boxers.
I've got absolutely no doubt that some of these dates, some of these fights that were announced yesterday will get called off. We've seen it all through last year, especially from our little round for pound angle. The amount of adjustments and pull-outs and stuff, and it'll happen again. Like, you know, it will happen.
It happens anyway, doesn't it? Though, like, like we've talked about Kelly and Avanesyan, which we will move on to. We'll look at the dates that have been confirmed. Like that, not through COVID necessarily, but through various reasons. There's always dropouts and pull-outs and rearrange.
Well, another non-COVID
exaggerated now, isn't it?
Got a cover left, another non-COVID related fella. So, you know, that's another one that's hit from the schedule, like, which I can't really be able to go into, but it's a blow for what was already a fledgling boxing schedule in January. So, you know what I mean? From a totally selfish boxing fan, consumer, blogger, Twitter point of view, like, I was pleased to see the fight. You know, we'll discuss each fight by minute, I'm sure, but I was just pleased that it's nice to get your little diary out and write in, like, dates and what's coming up. And, you know, like, it's been, 2 weeks since Luke Campbell, but I have missed a bit of boxing, like, especially on Saturday nights in lockdown like this, you know. Selfishly, when you watch the 5:30 kick-off and you're looking for something to watch sort of 7:30 onwards, and you think, oh, I've just settled down to a night of boxing here. But, you know, that's a proper selfish point of view. I get that, and there is bigger concerns out there with COVID and stuff. But, you know, it's, as I say, it's signed off, isn't it? And other sports have keep going, so why not boxing? You know, like, so yeah, I'm pleased it's back. No doubt there'll be turmoil and upheaval going forward, but hey, at least it's something to work towards, isn't it?
You'll be able to settle yourself down to a night of boxing on Saturday the 13th. Saturday the 13th of February.
Nothing. Yes.
So I've thought about different ways we could do this. Maybe grading them like A, B, C, D, whatever, or a mark out of 10. But I think we'll just look at each card in isolation. For want of a better term.
You're going to go chronologically? Good word.
Go for
it. Right. Let's just find my schedule, organised as ever.
So according to Matchroom, we've got Josh Warrington versus Mauricio Lara on Saturday.
That's on that one, because that's a minging one, that, isn't it? Like, I don't want to be, it's not a great fight, that, is it? I don't want to be too harsh, because
I was going to ask you to give it a grade, but maybe not after that.
Out of 10 or out of 5 or what?
However you want to do it.
1 out of 5.
Wow.
Because for weeks it looked like he was going to fight Zhu Kan, you know, in a decent fight as well. And then I think even up until this week it was, you know, that was what all the sources on Twitter and that were saying. And suddenly it all went a bit quiet. And it's like, oh no, it's not going to be him, but he will have a fight on this date. And it is Mauricio Lara. And I'm not even going to pretend that I've heard of him, to be honest with you.
I did a quick box rec this morning just to pad it out a little bit, because just what you said there, like this Zhu Kan, whichever way around it is, I should probably know that, a little bit of Mandarin. But like, he's like WBA champion. He's number 3 in Ring Magazine, and Warrington's ranked as number 1. So there's no current Ring Magazine champions. That could have been for the sort of undisputed in not of all the belts, but like to declare the number 1 fighter at featherweight in the world, it's been talked about for months and months and months. And this comes back to what we were just saying earlier about like fighters going from Warrington to Hearn, and the grass not always being greener, because what has like Warrington done since signing for Matchroom? Obviously, we're not privy to those negotiations as to why he's made that decision, but it's sort of almost the point where he's had some good fights under Frank Warren, some good wins. He's almost outgrown that stable and then what Frank could offer him. And he's going over to Matchroom with the Matchroom USA as his own platform, and these big fights, unifications being promised. And then it's just another routine defense against somebody who's like, what, top 10 in the governing body, like with the IBF.
Only this week he just magically appeared in the top 10.
I was just interested in that one. I was wondering that, because again, I just looked this morning to see like where he was ranked. He's, I think, 27th on BoxRec, which I don't tend to give too much credence to those rankings, but for like an overall viewpoint of where he is in the world, so you're like top 30 maybe, like based on that. But how's that different from his mandatory defense against like Sofiane Takouts or whatever, like the French fellow we beat? Comfortably, like
this thing is with Warrington, and even this fight is all right. We'll allow a slight grace period. You know, first fight back, there was rumors.
No, but this is what I was saying earlier. Like, no, like he's moved promoters. Why shouldn't there be this lull in momentum?
What was the reason the Chinese fighter didn't happen? Was there a reason?
I've seen some just rumors about like visas and stuff like that and like travel, but I don't know is the answer. I don't know how close that was to being done or what.
I'd like that one to get rearranged. I'll see a clip here on Twitter and Josh Warren saying he's sort of blaming Kanju or you can for pulling out. You know, it's just a bit. It's a bit annoying. But I mean, when I say grace period, I mean I guess for Warrington really, because like he's had a good. He did have a good run under Frank Warren. Do you know what I mean? Like he, you know, I think it was Selby, Frampton, Galahad. Was it 3 in a row? Yeah, Selby, Frampton, Galahad. Then obviously blasted Kush out of there. I just thought, like he's similar to Billy Joe Saunders. Like you like to see these fighters active, so you're pleased that he's active. But on the other hand, so if it leads to bigger things, sort of like Canelo, Yildirim, like you can I know you hate me doing this, but you can sort of scratch one off your list and be like, right, okay, but I'd want Josh Warrington to fight again in May if I was Eddie Hearn, and if I was Josh Warrington, if he deals with Lara as easy as people think he should be out April, May again after this and have some sort of plan. And like I said, even if it's Kid Galahad 2, which was dull as dishwater, then it's got a bit more excitement in a build up anyway to like Mauricio or Lara, who I just don't know anything about. Like I've just boxed
outside of Mexico once. I was in Argentina.
I said that. I lost his pro debut, and then I can't even see that he's fought for any sort of fringe Latin American, North American, whatever Mexican title or anything. I know now about him, but if obviously, if right, they were working on the Kanju fight right until the last minute, realised shit that's fell through for whatever reason, and they've literally drafted this fella in as a plan B at the last minute, and they didn't want to do a Josh Warrington versus TBC. But you know,
I think, that's where again you go back to each fight individually and the circumstances around it. Like on paper, it's not a good fight. It's not particularly competitive based on what we know and obviously don't know about Lara. But then, like, as you say, if Warrington, it's just like, right, get me out, like, get me a fight. This guy, obviously, Chandu's like, it's not happening. Then, right, we'll put somebody else in, we'll move on and hopefully get through this one, no bother, and look within the next couple of months, get back out in like a competitive fight.
Absolutely, similar to Billy Joe Saunders, like I was saying, like you can sort of you forgive, or like Canelo, who's probably going to fight Yildirim, you can forgive them if it means that Canelo will fight someone better in May. But it's a bit underwhelming. Pleased to see Josh Warrington back out. Like, I like him. Like, I'll never bet against him again in my life. It's cost me some money over the year. He's defied. He's been better than I thought he was. You know, the cynical view of Josh Warrington a few years back was just that he was a Leeds cash cow and he could sell out an arena or sell out a stadium, and he's actually a pretty good fighter. You know what I mean?
And I think, like, again, Hearn sort of had him up to a point, didn't he? He was like European level, and he's gone away, he's come back, and then he's probably one now that they'll be looking at if he's fighting over here to headline your sort of Saturday night cards. We talked about that next generation of fighters that we've put this at length loads of times, but like underneath those marquee names, does Warrington now become that like marquee name?
Yeah.
He's obviously done enough outside of the Matchroom bubble to get that recognition and get that respect, and now he is one of those Saturday headliners. I think in a good fight, you're looking potentially pay-per-view, like if he's in with a Shakur Stevenson, somebody like that. But for the time being, you'd imagine his next 3 fights, that's going to be world title fights on a Saturday night Sky show. Yeah,
you're totally right. It's a smart re-signing for Matchroom, really. Like you said, it can add a bit of a gravitas, a bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Good reputation, a good like selling point. Like there's a world title fight. Exactly what you just said. I'm basically repeating you. There's a world title fight on regular. There's a world title fight on regular Sky. It's, you know what I mean. He's exactly what you just said. That he is that name under the names. You know what I mean?
And then I think if you move along, like we'll go through the schedule, and this sort of that level of fighter on each of those cards essentially.
Well, I just think
4 out of the 5 anyway.
Quick one for that one. I like. There's just a proper. I'm not even going to give an opinion, but on that one, you've got Zelfa Barrett against Kiko Martinez, which I think is. Oh, we'll give a quick opinion. In my opinion, it's come at a really good time for Zelfa. I think it's going to be a great name in his record, but I would expect him to beat Kiko Martinez in 2021, and got no arguments or anything towards Lee Wood against Reece Mould for the British featherweight title.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Like, again, Zelfa's showed that he's got class, he's got good power, he's a skillful boxer.
Yeah.
He needs that sort of name, and it's bridging that gap, I suppose, from British to European level in the sort of Martinez that's going to be in front of him on come fight night. But again, it's one that he should be dealing with, shouldn't he? Probably a couple of weight classes above where Martinez was at his best as well, like well past his prime. He's got to beat him and essentially look good doing it. I'd expect him to do that. And then decent domestic class, that's what you want from a Saturday night card.
No, I know no issues whatsoever.
Even with an underwhelming main event.
Aye, exactly. British title live on Sky. Sound great. Right, let's quickly move on. February the 20th. I feel like we've discussed this a million times. But here it is again. David Avanesyan defending his European welterweight title against Josh Pretty Boy Kelly. I love the fight. You love the fight. We both love the fight. Like, I think everything crossed. Like, it's now a bust, isn't it? Shit, a bust for that fight now.
I think we'll have to wait until the first bell rings and then do a preview show for this one.
Absolutely, aye. But if we want to keep that really brief, then we love it. And
honestly, yeah, I think, like, again, there's nothing more to be said than you haven't just said there, and we've said already. One thing I will add, though, I think the longer this has gone on, the more it's going to favour Kelly. I think you can look into that however you want with some of the previous cancellations, but I think obviously he's the younger man, he's the fresher man. It's probably been more frustrating for Avanesyan, if that makes sense, that it hasn't happened. And the sort of the time that's gone on and the time that's passed, I think this is going to be the breakout performance for Josh Kelly. I think he's going to win and look impressive doing it.
Good, I like that. Probably a bit of value there. If you want to be a good evenly priced.
Florian Marku, Ryland Charlton fight that you discussed earlier, that's been put on this undercard again, so obviously that's been rescheduled.
Right.
That
again, we've discussed
potentially be fireworks on that card.
I love that fight. You know, I've mentioned it before. Love it. Two fighters, tradition. You know, like I said, good sort of along the small hole type of scene. But Ryland Charlton took his big chance on the Matchroom show when he sort of dismantled Joe Laws, and he reaped the rewards. And Mark, who's got a lot of things going for him, despite his draw in his last fight. So yeah, love it. Good fight. Sound. Really good.
Another one being rescheduled is Amy Timlin, Carly Skelly, that obviously was fought to a draw previously, so that they're getting a chance to get it back on as well. And probably not one that's going to like potentially draw like a lot of fans to it, but again, it's a good close competitive fight the first time, so it's nice to see that both fighters will get the chance to sort of get a decisive result to it, and obviously hopefully for them get the win.
Exactly, and like it continues Matchroom sort of like narrative and sort of leading the way in female women's boxing. So, you know, whether it's your thing or not, they do produce some decent 50-50 clashes, and another one we'll come on to soon. But yeah, great. Solid night of boxing. Good. What we are next? Where we are?
Next one, we've got another rematch. Bit more high profile. We've got Alexander Povetkin fighting Dillian Whyte on Saturday the 6th of March.
Sky Sports.
Safe to say this one's going to be on Sky Box Office rather than a Sky Sports.
To be honest with you, I thought it was dead. I didn't think after the last postponement of it, I didn't even think it was sort of still under discussion. I just thought it was done and they were going to go to separate ways. So I don't know if had my eyes shut towards that one, but I was pretty pleased to see it announced yesterday.
I think it's an interesting one. Obviously, any rematch is when the sort of betting underdog wins the first time round. You can argue whether Povetkin should have been favourite or not for it, but the way the fight was going as well, the way it ended was shocking. It was sensational. But
yeah,
I think there's a lot surrounding this one because of White's position and how close he's perceived to have been to that WBC title shot. That he has to beat Povetkin. Like, he has to. It's not just about avenging a loss. It's about putting himself back where he believes he belongs, whether you agree with that or not. Like, it would be very hard for him if he's not in that mandatory position for the WBC to go away and rebuild and sort of work his way around it. Like, I don't think, whether it's just from a reputational point of view or from the point of view of the sanctioning body, how does he get to a world title now without going down a mandatory route, without
I think it's
fighting
fascinating.
these eliminators that he previously hasn't wanted to do?
He has to win this for a start. If he loses this, then God,
That's what I mean. But like, even if say this one hadn't been rearranged, then
yeah.
he'd be a bit in limbo because he's already got like good names on his record, the likes of Joseph Parker and like former champions. So he's been there or thereabouts, but he pretty much nailed his colours to the nailed. I don't know what the phrase is, like pinned his hopes on the WBC route.
Yeah.
He's had chances to go down like the IBF route and fight Pulev, and he refused to do that. Whether we think he's in his rights to do that or not, that's a matter of opinion. But he decided not to do that. He turned down fighting Joshua for all of the belts. Again, his reasons, whatever you make of those, up to you. But he's had opportunities to go elsewhere, and he's stuck to the WBC. Maybe because he's thought that getting the Dillian Whyte, Deontay Wilder fight was the more winnable route for him. But then he's come unstuck, and as far as I'm aware, then Povetkin sort of leapfrogged him in that WBC position. If he hasn't officially, then he obviously should have.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, you're now looking at it like, well, whichever way he goes, he's going to have to not step down necessarily, but acknowledge that there's an additional roadblock in his way, whichever route he takes. And
he might just be one of them. He might just be one of them fighters. He might just never win one, but he might just be one of them fighters that you have to enjoy when he's there. He's never really in that many bad fights. He has been in a couple of shots.
No, I don't think he is. I think he brings excitement, and I think it's a whole other debate whether a fighter who's fringe world level that essentially is exciting, but is also vulnerable, and those two go together. Like, a lot of his fights are exciting because he's got a chance of getting clipped and hurt. And he can be a bit reckless. He's not necessarily a defensive boxer first and foremost. So he does bring fans to seats, and he obviously does get enough views for them to justify putting them on pay-per-view again and again. Whether, as a fan, you think that is enough to be a pay-per-view star, that's, again, going to come down to whether you put your money down and pay or not. But if he wants to win a world title, like, the quickest route is through Povetkin again, like, sort of right that wrong from his point of view and crack on. Obviously now it's not Wilder, it's Fury with the WBC belt, and obviously there's a whole other world of discussion about what's going to happen with that. Like, it makes sense, I think, for him to pursue this rematch and get the win over Povetkin, which is a lot easier said than done.
I like the fight again. Like, it was mint last time, it was one of the most dramatic finishes, I guess, of 2020, and seeing him go down like that in sort of in his backyard was just mad, very dramatic, like I said. No issue with it. Like, I like it. Like, it's a good rematch. Again, we could talk all day about Dillian Whyte's situation, but I just, like I said, not everyone will win. He might never win one. Like, I've always thought from the minute he lost to Joshua in the first one that would happen again. I can see it again. It's such an easy fight for Matchroom to make. I do honestly think they will collide again one day, Whyte and Joshua. But for now, he's got to come past Povetkin. Lose that one, then you've got even more questions to sit and talk about Dillian Whyte. But maybe he's found what they're calling it, like a good dance partner, and that could be Povetkin. It could be fireworks and knockdowns, and both men knocked down.
He's had it previously with Chisora, hasn't he? And the fact that obviously they had two good fights together. It was like these styles that just sort of mesh well. And the first Povetkin fight was an absolute cracker on, as you say. There's knockdowns, there's all the drama and everything that you want to associate with the heavyweight division was in that, and encapsulated in that Harper fight, essentially, how many rounds it went. So from that point of view, then brilliant. Like, who wouldn't want to see that again?
And look at Povetkin now. He's probably getting a bit older, and in his advanced years, I'm not saying he's not ambitious, but it's probably not all about being a world champion for him now. It's sort of got gloves, will travel to Matchroom shows basically, and he's been in against a good few of them now, and he's sort of making his little name for himself on the road, which, you know, at one point it was Russia and Russia only for him. And, you know, he's found this new sort of lease of light, a bit of an Indian summer for an older fighter who just seems to be saying, like, sorry, I'll go in with Huey Fury or Hunter or Tracy or Dillian Whyte. And, like, he's found a bit of a niche that way. And I like Povetkin for that. I think it's quite entertainment. So, seems to be Matchroom sort of gun for hire in the heavyweights now, which...
There's an argument you put Povetkin into, like, third best heavyweight in the world.
Hell of a fighter, man.
Like, based on that record, like I say, he's lost to Klitschko and Joshua, but like he's got a good collection of names on his record in the win column.
Absolutely.
Obviously, we don't know what's happening with Wilder, and based on their last fight, you have to rank Povetkin above Dillian Whyte because he absolutely chinned him.
Exactly. We'll watch again, you know, like we'll come into the pay-per-view debate close at the time, I guess, like we always do. But
yeah, because again, like you look at the main event, does that capture your attention? Does that intrigue you enough to part with your money? If you're undecided, then you drop down to the undercard, don't you? And you see what's there in terms of overall value of the card. And there's a couple of decent fights on there. Like Fabio Wardley did a massive step up. I was a little surprised to see him in with Eric Molina.
And I like that one. I think that's very, very well matched and well, like I think he probably will beat Eric Molina, but it's such a cleverly matched and cleverly guided fighter in Fabio Wardley. Like I just think that's
what we talked about again, and we'll come back to him, I'm sure, when we talk about Conor Benn. Like you've got these sorts of fights that bridge the gap. We mentioned in there with like Zelfa Barrett, and you want these fights that are sort of in between that British level and world level. What Eric Molina has got left in the tank will be subject to debate, and we'll obviously find out on fight night. But for Wardley, who's not the most experienced amateur, and even as a pro, he's only had 10 fights. Like
I don't think he wasn't amateur. He was a white collar fighter in terms of
experience, but one that you would, because they've made it and because of how Wardley's guided and managed by Dillian Whyte, you think, well, okay, like they must know something, they must be confident, they must be feeling ready to do this.
I think it's very well made, well matched, and there's sort of no rush with them. I've seen Rob Tibbett saying on Twitter earlier, and I totally agree that he's had about 14 fights in his entire life. Like he came from the white collar scene, and now he's had 10 pro fights, and he's in with Eric Molina, and I think it's just so nicely guided and nicely matched, and a fighter that there's no rush. There really is no rush for Fabio Wardley. Like
with no rush, then do you not think there's a bit of a danger that they've maybe pushed him a bit too quickly into this, like facing someone who's mixed at the level of Molina?
Usually I'd say yes to stuff like that. Usually I would say yes, but I think the older I get, the more wise I'm becoming to sort of matchmaking in that, and I fell into that trap with Conor Benn and Formella last time. Do you know what I mean? That these things 9 times out of 10 are well calculated and well matched, and there's probably a lot of thought gone into it. Yes, like Molina's got the record and been of a better fighters, like stopped off Hrgovic, beat off Breazeale, stopped off AJ, stopped from Wilder. Do you know what I mean? Like, yes, he's stopped off Ariola. Like, he's been in with names, but he's lost quite a lot of names as well. What was his best run? What, probably a decade ago now or something. But again, I think it's like Zelfa, and probably like we'll come on to Conor Benn in a bit. It's a good name, but I think there's probably a lot of due diligence has went on around that, and it's going to be, it's a decent name on his career if he beats him on his record, 100%. But I like Fabio Wardley. I like what I've seen from him, and it's just that again, that bridging fights, like you said, he's been in with Lilly. He then stopped Richard Loy, so it's just that next little carefully guided step for him. I like it. Also, one of the undercard that I wanted to mention was a rare example of a Matchroom and Queensberry fighter clashing, and that's James Metcalf's coming over to fight on a Matchroom show. I'm
really excited for this one.
Yeah, promoted by Frank Warren, but I think obviously it's been mandated. I believe it's for the vacant British super welterweight title. He's fighting Ted Cheeseman. So, a little rare example. However much, what's the word? I can't imagine they've sat around on a Zoom call, Frank and Eddie, to even begin to discuss Cheeseman and Metcalf. As I say, it's probably been mandated, and we're here out of necessity. But a rare example now of a Frank Warren fighter.
Yeah, do you think when lockdown kicked in and Frank and Eddie were going back and forth on Twitter with all these Matchroom versus Queensberry, that this is the grand result of those talks and all that back and forth.
This is what we get. Cheeseman Metcalf, but I like the fighting. You know, I was just thinking on Twitter the other day, like, you see a lot of commotion on Twitter when the British Boxing Board of Control, like, circulars come out. And I don't pay them much attention because I think a lot of the time sometimes it is that. It's adding more sort of hypothetical nature to a very hypothetical sport at times, talking about matchups that don't exist and probably won't. And a lot of them it is Matchroom and Queensberry fighters pitted off against each other. And this one's came to fruition, and I like it. Like, you know, good, solid British title fight. Metcalf still unbeaten in 21 now. Cheeseman, a couple of losses on there, but never really an adult fight, is he, Cheeseman? So, don't know how I'd call it at this stage, but a fight I'm definitely looking forward to, 100%.
I think what you just touched on now, the board, is further evidence of what I said earlier, and that like promoters are the ones that actually pull the strings there. Like, the board can come out and name all these, but how many times do we see a fighter drop a British title or swerve an eliminator or go down a different route, or, you know, it's not the right time and all this? So, like, especially when it's what I would say was a promoter's priority fighter. With all due respect to Ted Cheeseman, I don't think Eddie Hearn is going to lose much sleep over him winning or losing that British title against JJ Metcalf.
Sure, on the other foot, I don't think Frank Warren's probably, you know, he's hardly.
No, that's what I mean. That's exactly it. And again, it sounds massively brutal and disrespectful to those two fighters, but they're the ones that, between the two promoters, are the easiest ones to make, because there's relatively little risk or to the promoters, and both fighters will go into that confident and expect to win. So it's one that they're probably happy to leave to a purse bid, or like Frank will happily let JJ Metcalf go over onto a Matchroom pay-per-view show and pick up a decent purse to fight Cheeseman for the British. It's one that, in theory, you want more fights to be that easy to make and like that easy just to get on with and get done.
What was the last example of that? I always remember Billy Joe Saunders, John Ryder from a good few years ago now was a rare one, a Matchroom fighter.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first ones we covered for BBB, I went out to Birmingham for Eggington Bradley Skeet.
Nice.
Skeet won the British there, like as the away fighter on a Matchroom show. I'm not honestly sure about which other ones have sort of happened. Like, and they're there again, like, we're talking British level fights, you know what I mean? It's not anything higher than that or anything of higher value to the promoters, and they get a bit more protective over it, and they're not going to risk a sort of high profile loss to the other, like to a rival.
Little tiny mention as well for that card. Looks like that's the first time we'll get to see Campbell Hatton in the pro ranks as well. So pro debut for him listed on there as well.
Again, is a stroke of genius, really. Like, you've got 5 cards to put him on.
Yeah.
Name value alone. We've seen this with Conor Benn.
Absolutely, yeah.
You chuck him on a pay-per-view card way down. He's in an easy fight for his debut. He's going to win.
Yeah.
That might even attract like a couple of thousand more pay-per-view buys. And that sounds stupid saying like that, and a totally unproven prospect. But all those Ricky Hatton fans, like we've seen with Chris Eubank, we've seen with the Nigel Benn fans, like tuning in for Conor. It happens, you know what I mean? There's a selling point there straight away.
Massively, it will. It's got that casual name all over it, and people will want to see that next sort of generation of Hattons. But yeah, that will definitely add to the buys. You know, that's
a really low cost little fight to put on a pay-per-view show. The
especially
return off it'll be huge.
I've got absolutely no doubt that, you know, his next fight when crowds are back will be in Manchester, like Victoria Warehouse, or, you know what I mean, and, you know, try and do something with him there. But for now, bit of a stroke of genius, like you say. Put him on that one. We move on from that one and we go to the 20th of March, a fight again, which we've discussed a lot in the past. Rescheduled again is Lawrence Okoli going for his world title again against Krzysztof Glowacki. Like the fight, like it again, like it the first time, like it again, rescheduled. No issues really with that one. We've been through this, and I feel like I repeat myself a lot, but we've been through it before, and like Coley sort of seems to be the fastest mover now, I guess, of those male Olympians from the last Olympics, going for a world title in his 16th fight. Done it the way we all liked, you know, British, Commonwealth, European. Whether you like his style, whether you don't, whether he's your cup of tea stylistically, there's a lot being said about that already. But hats off to him, chasing the big fights, not messing around, going straight in. 16 fight WBC, WBO cruiserweight title. So WBO, sorry, not WBC. Good on him. Let's hope he delivers.
Yeah, it's interesting that despite his style and the criticisms that a lot of fans have around him, that he's been moved so quickly. There's others of that, again, not just the Olympians, but from that squad that turned pro at a similar time and had a similar amount of fights and are nowhere near world level. Like the progress he's had is remarkable, really, for 15 pro fights.
Absolutely, got a bit of an easy blast out in the last year. I think was it on the AJ on the card quickly.
I think you could have beat him.
Dismantle that fella with Bambi legs on the undercard, but I blasted him out there, just shake a bit of ring rust off now with Shane McGuigan. So let's see what changes that makes in the long term, and I guess we'll find out on 20th of March. But
and again, he could be like one of these, picks up that world title, then suddenly you've got a date filler for your Saturday night Sky shows. Like, you know what I mean? Like we're talking about we keep going back to it about the marquee names that he could be, and that he's very close to that now. And I'm not saying he's going to sell millions of pay-per-view buys and stuff, but for what Matchroom need to prop up their cards in the UK, he could be the ideal fit. Like in the next 6 months, you could be looking at like Josh Kelly being European champion, fringes of a world title. You could be looking at Warrington, as I say, getting a couple more defences in before going on to something bigger and better.
Yeah.
You've then got a Coley, if he wins, he's title defence for him. And suddenly again, we'll come on to, we've mentioned him already, but Conor Benn's on the next show. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail. But like, you've suddenly then got potentially half a dozen world title or similar level fighters that can headline cards that we haven't really had going back through 2020.
It's funny. It's you bang on. Like it's only if you're a bit sort of sad like us too, and you like actually look into it and open your eyes and just look into the little shifts that go on in boxing and that sort of the cycle that never stops spinning, but little sort of nuances in front of your eyes that, like, if you disappeared from a year for boxing, you would see probably a whole host of new Saturday night like headliners or 18 months in, like, especially with the DAZN thing now. I think we'll see it more over the next sort of 12, 18 months of like new fighters headlining cards on Sky and suddenly like shifting their way up, sort of like Conor Benn, like, who in many people's eyes was just still like a bit of a prospect, but now he's going to headline Sky shows, and Coley, Boati, Warrington, like, and it is interesting. It's a topic I do find interesting that, like, brings us back to my earlier point of like just sort of it's the end of that era and a new era always starts in boxing, and that's the thing. Like that's where your Liam Smiths and your Rocky Fieldings and your Ricky Burns have suddenly, for the time, sort of catches up. The opportunities become less, and there's the new kids on the block pushing in the door. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah, it's happening. It's promoters' priority, isn't it? Like these fighters are a higher priority for the promoter than, as you say, some of the maybe more faded names or the older fighters. And it's not that these guys don't have anything to offer; they could still be put in fights. But if you're Matchroom and you're trying to plot out the next 18 months to 2 years, those fighters that you've mentioned aren't really ones that you're going to pin your hopes around and almost build the stable around.
It's a topic we talked about ages ago. Like, it does happen. It happens in football. It happens in boxing. That, like, some people come to an end. Like, we've
just in all walks of life, doesn't it?
Like De Gale, Groves, Bellew. We can name them all. Like, that era's sort of gone now, and then a new era ushers in, and there'll be fights where we probably get frustrated along the way, as people are, like, what you call learning fights in boxing. But then them carefully managed step ups, which I guess brings us on to Conor Benn, who has been a bit of a favourite of ours since we started doing like proper regular podcast. Favourite in discussions. I mean, we do talk a lot of time. We spend a lot of time.
That's why he gets the promotion that he does, because people talk about him. People want to debate him and discuss him constantly.
We talk about a lot of time talking about this division. I spend a lot of time talking about this division as well. He's still only 24. It does seem now that, again, further evidence that he's sort of missing out those domestic names, which we say a million times. Like, that's his prerogative, his management's prerogative, that doesn't seem at this point unless caveat, unless he's on a collision course with Josh Kelly. I think if they both win the next fights, the clamour and calls for that fight will get bigger again. If they both win the next fight, yeah. But for now, he's fighting Sammy Vargas, and again, I just think that is, for me, I'll be reluctant. Well, will I be reluctant to bet against him? I do think at one point Conor Benn will get found out. Do I think it'll be Sammy Vargas? Probably not. You know, I fell in that trap with Formella last time, and it's similar to what we've just discussed about Zelfa Barrett and about Fabio Wardley. I think, again, we'll see here a classic good piece of Matchroom matchmaking. Just that nice, careful next step, good name. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And I think I agree entirely that the fact that like Conor Benn has navigated his way around these domestic challenges that potentially could have been the ones to find him out, but from his point of view and from Matchroom's point of view, they haven't wanted to risk getting them found out at English or British level because the clamour to see him suddenly stops. You can't then prop him up as the headliner. Like Anthony Fowler, as an example, he's one we missed off actually. He's fighting on one of the previous undercards. I can't remember which one it is. Anyway, he's like fighting, but he's an example of that one loss in a domestic grudge match. Just how far it's set him back, and I don't mean that in the sense of how he's a worse fighter for it. I just think he's changed trainer since. The momentum hasn't been there. There was time spent sort of rebuilding and chasing a rematch, and then he's gone his own way and he's looking to fight other routes. And if Conor Benn had done that, then you can't then have him as that headline act. Whereas from the Formella fight, he impressed a lot of people, and I don't like to use the word in all seriousness, but he impressed a lot of haters who wanted to see him fall and wanted to see him lose. A lot of these anti-Matchroom podcasts and Twitter accounts and all the rest of it, like they're wanting to see Conor Benn slip up because of basically how much he's been shoved down people's throats since turning pro. They've used that name, like he's got opportunities on pay-per-view cards, he's got television slots where you think there's better options out there, better fighters out there, but he really boxed well in the Formella fight, and that was one where you hinted at and said already, like, that might have been the one that was a bridge too far for him and a step too far. And Vargas is a similar level. And I think you'll see Conor Benn, should he win this one, fight another 2 or 3 of this sort of level. Guys who got experience but don't necessarily pose the threat to him. And he'll just be not bread and water, but he'll be staying at the same level, be learning his craft and fine-tuning things before they sort of go down that final push of the WBA route and see who's what the situation is, get him a WBA regular title or an interim title or whatever's up for grabs. And I think Josh Kelly, should he beat Avanesyan, then he's like the European champion. I think he'll fight and defend that against some sort of European level guys, again getting towards that world title, and they'll have eyes on matching them for some version of the WBA title somewhere down the line. But that could be 2022.
That's a good, you've called that well there. Again, you know, we've touched on the names, people like Chris Congo, I'm sure he'll fancy that one. It's, you know, if you don't fight these domestic names, there'll always be, you know, that little bit of intrigue looking from the outside in of like, should he be fighting these names? But like I said, people do different routes, you know, not everyone goes down that route, and he's obviously like, he's going for that, you know, those sort of ranking fights. This one's for the WBA Continental title. You just look down Sammy Vargas's resume there, and it's just the level of fighter he's been in with and lost to, don't get us wrong, like Virgil Ortiz, Collazo, Khan, Danny Garcia, and Errol Spence was sort of 5 defeats out of his 6. That is like light years above sort of anyone that Conor Benn's even been in with. So experience-wise, he's been in with some huge like bona fide world-class sort of stars in his time. But like Molina, like we talked about Molina there, I do think, again, we'll see You know, it's without doubt again the best name Conor Benn's been in with. Like it's better name than Formella, record wise, resume wise. But
and it's a better name than the likes of Chris Congo have been in with. Now, if I was to match Ben against Congo previously, before the Formella fight, I'd have very, very confidently picked Chris Congo. 100%. I think if they were to fight now, I'd probably less confidently pick Chris Congo to win. But then Conor Ben is the one that I'm talking about potentially getting in for a world title somewhere down the line. He's the one headlining shows. Like, it's that there's the justification why he hasn't fought for a British title on his way up, because he's got himself, or the promoters have got him into this position that he's in against good names. Like, he can then turn around to fighters like Chris Congo, even Josh Kelly, and say, like, I've beat like Samuel Vargas, former world title challenger, Sebastian Formella, fought Sean Porter. Like, I've been in with these names. Like, who have you fought? And suddenly the momentum's sort of shifting a bit, where like Ben then is more like not in charge, but you know what I mean. Like, I don't want to go down A side, B side, and all that bollocks, but like he then is in a much stronger position when it comes to negotiating and picking and choosing fights and sort of mapping out his future.
It is. I would love to think him and Kelly Hart on a collision course, being with the same promoters, same division, like same weight. I just think that would, if they do keep winning, sometime maybe later this year or next year, I don't know. That would be. I'd love that. Like, that's a good fight. That probably will be pay-per-view in this country, no doubt. Whether you agree with that or not, it probably will be. So again, that would be a decent one, but no real issue. Like, he's fighting Sammy Vargas. He's not fighting the bin man. You know what I mean? But I do expect him to win it. I'd be interested to see if any odds have been announced for that, and just to see what the line's open with for that one. But it's funny because after his last fight, he got really angry in that post-fight interview, didn't he? He was like calling out Josh Kelly, and that's the one I want next. And we all knew Josh Kelly had Avanesyan lined up anyway. So
I think just putting that out there, it signals that intent, doesn't it? And it's a fight that, you just say, could be made in theory fairly easily. European title on the line, some sort of WBA ranking or belt there. Like, Conor Benn's what? He's had 17, 18 fights now, like less than 20. It wouldn't surprise me to see him just fight this sort of level of opponent, or like a couple of maybe softer touches thrown in there as well, just for his next even 6 or 7 fights. You'll looking to get his record up to 25 fights or whatever, you know what I mean? If they want to go down that route and keep him and Kelly apart until one of them gets the world title or gets something. But again, like, as a fan, I would love to see it sooner, like see them both win and fight next, essentially. Like, just thinking from that promoter's cap on, and like from the fighter's point of view and the management point of view, if they put them in together, obviously one of them's not going to win. So then, like, that suddenly drops one of them from that headline status almost, like, instantly. Whereas if they're both winning, and we saw it with like Bellew and Cleverly, how many shows did they both headline separately, where the other one was ringside calling them out before they actually made the fight? There was at least, like, when they both went up to cruiserweight, 2 or 3 fights they had where, like, after each of them, it was just the other's name was the first thing that came out in the interviews, and it built it, and then, as you say, ended up on pay-per-view.
Just Conor Benn, like, from a sort of cynical point of view as well, like, I guess we all thought he was just a bit of a living off his dad's type of name. And my thing with Conor Benn was always, when he steps up to someone that'll hit him back, he'll get hurt and he'll get caught. That still may well ring true. There was times, we mentioned this against Formella, where he did leave himself open, but Formella had about as much power as a packet of crisps. So, you know what I mean? There will be times where but I just mentioned the odds to you there, right? I don't know if you've looked, right? But what odds what do you think Conor Benn is to beat Sammy Vargas, odds-wise?
I haven't looked, but I would guess probably 1 to 5, 1 to 6.
1 to 14. 14 to 1 on with Bet365. 18 to 1 with 2 others. Only 3 books.
I'm going to go even narrower than that, but then, like, again, this is where it comes down to what you said earlier. It's like it's that perfect timing of the matchmaking, isn't it? Because the bookies will be looking, thinking what you're thinking with that cynical approach, almost, that they're not going to put Ben in with a fight that he's going to lose.
Well, that's it.
You know what I mean? Like, obviously, there is a chance that he can, but like, Ben is undoubtedly, of the two, he's the fighter on the up. He's the home fighter. It's going to take a hell of an effort from Vargas to win. Vargas lost, what, 6 fights, did you say? He's drawn a couple as well, I think. Like, he's not there to... They're not making this as a 50-50 fight.
Yeah.
But the approach we've just sort of taken there is going to be the promoter side of things, where it's like, well, it's a step up for Conor Benn. It's an experienced opponent. It's the best name on his record so far. But then ultimately, you can't then say it's a really competitive fight because Ben's expected to win comfortably.
Well, that's it. And I guess we've all, myself included anyways, has definitely learned my lesson from Formella, you know, like, sort of will be reluctant to, you know, bet against them again, and especially in these, what we call these step up, these learning fights and that.
Yeah, do you then just bet against, like, back against Conor Benn each time in the chances that someone he faces somewhere down the line, like one of this sort of potential level of opponent, could outbox him or could beat him?
8-1, Sammy Vargas, if you think this is the time he'd step up. Me personally, I think I learned a lot from the last fight, and I think, you know, he is better. He is a man that stayed away and stayed in the gym and learned his craft a bit better, and there was massive improvements there last time out. So I think you have to take your hat off to Conor Benn there, and you know what I mean. And like, he's better than I give him credit for. Whether he's going to turn out a world class sort of welterweight, like a world champion, remains to be seen. But like I always say on this show, not everyone can be one, and there's, you know, give it a go, might as well. That's what he's doing, isn't he? So good luck to him. And again, it's a fight I quite like. And again, like you say, he is that next generation now of Saturday night headliners.
And further down the card, draw notwithstanding, someone will be a world champion following Rachel Ball against Shannon Courtney, the rematch. And that's for the WBA World Bantamweight title.
Interesting that Shannon's got a fight earlier than that as well, during.
Yeah, I noticed that. At first, I didn't know if it was a typo at first, but then I thought, well, actually, they've obviously, again, she wants to be out, like, she wants to be active before the rematch. Yeah,
she obviously wants that one more. She, you know, there was a lot of good stuff she did in the last fight against a very sort of limited opponent, but she scored a lovely sort of finish to get that Ball defeat out of her system. So I guess she wants one more before Rachel Ball too.
I dare say it'll be another limited opponent.
Probably but.
And I think this is the main criticism I have of women's boxing, in that there's not the depth there. Like, we've seen fighters in the men's game, don't get me wrong, where they lose and suddenly they're back in with a world title shot or whatever, if they've been at that level for a bit anyway.
Yeah.
But Ball and Courtney wasn't that long ago, and that was sort of a domestic clash. Courtney's lost that fight, come back 1-1, is going to have won 2 by the time they rematch, and suddenly there's a world title on the line. It's remarkable. Talk about Anthony Fowler as an example, like just how long it's taken him to rebound from a loss at British level.
Yeah,
and still not be anywhere near world title level.
Now the depth's just not there in female boxing, and I guess that's probably a good thing for consumers, because we don't always watch them getting padded. And for punters, like, you know, we are seeing them quickly bang off the bounce. You know what I mean? And like, no issue with that being made at the same time. I like that a lot. Like, it was a good first fight. A lot, you know, I did think Ball won it personally, but I know some people, maybe from the Sky angle, thought Courtney won it. But good fight again, second time round, for if that's what you're into women's boxing. So that'll be interesting to see how Courtney comes through for a tune-up, which I'm sure she will with no issues, and then straight into that one again.
And Savannah Marshall's also on that undercard. There's a couple names on there, like Felix Cash Farouk, yet to be mentioning against any specific names, but obviously Savannah will be defending her world title as well. So from that promoter's point of view, you look and you can say, oh, well, we've got like 2 world title fights on the card. And I think, technically that is true. I think it's a good way for Matchroom and other promoters who were adamantly against women's boxing, to then be a bit more progressive with their outlook and obviously get them on the shows. But also, in terms of what is reported that the female fighters are getting paid, it's a a cost-effective way of getting world title fights on your cards, and again being able to pad out the cards with what you can market as a very high level of boxing.
What do you think overall then of this first sort of wave of announcements? I guess there's plenty for us to get stuck into, round for pound wise and weigh-in wise and podcast wise. Some good, some bad. Fair.
I think the word you just used there, plenty. It's the quantity is definitely there. Going from nothing, said earlier, from famine to feast, like from not having anything lined up to then suddenly 5 dates. I mean, the Kelly Avanesyan rematch was something we were rearrangement, something we were expecting. Povetkin Whyte rematch was something that had been mooted. So, like, despite you not being aware of it, it was in the pipeline. Like, there were two, and then it was right. Well, which other three are there? Obviously, Warrington was potentially the one I was looking forward to the most.
Yeah.
Against Chanzu, but then now that's not happening. It's maybe slipped its way down to the one I'm the least interested in. A Kohli Glowacki, a legitimate world title fight. Like, more than happy to watch that. I think overall, I think the main events are decent. I think the Conor Ben one is probably one that I'll be like, right, on a Saturday night, there's nothing else on, I will be sitting watching. Like, I know I will. I'm not going to make any bones about that. But it's the one that I'm probably more likely to have on in the background of just looking at the main events.
Well, you know,
there's a piqued my interest a bit more. Like, obviously, we've both gone through them all in detail. The Kelly Avanesyan one is probably the one I'm looking forward to the most. No bias on, as well as just it's a fast fight. I think it'll be tremendous.
That's it. And I think obviously, you know me, I'll sit and watch most things, but for us, we've always got round for pound. That'll run hopefully when that gets, you know, sort of side by side with all these fights and stuff. And we've got like these podcasts that we now commit to on a much more regular basis. So plenty to get your teeth into. And as I said earlier in the show, like it's nice just to sort of fill your diary up, and you know, along with what we've got coming up, sort of DAZN and stateside wise and stuff. There's a few things scheduled on there. So, and I guess we might as well. We're not a Matchroom affiliated podcast by any means, so we might as well look at Frank's one and only announcement so far, and that is a fight that I didn't see coming this earlier. I'm honest with you, but I'm all for it. I'm pleased about it, and that is Jamal Herring v Carl Frampton. Sort of cleverly little done by Frank there, beating Matchroom to the punch of getting something announced first. Anyway, one fight, that's all he's announced thus far, but I like it. Last roll of the dice with Frampton to try and become a 3-weight world champion.
Yeah, there was another question about this, wasn't it, from Broken Nose Boxing, about what do you make of the sort of the Matchroom announcement that they're going to make an announcement, and it's a very like Frank Warren type trick to pull.
Massively.
But he's actually got in and announced the fight there, which is it's a really competitive fight. It's not one I particularly want to talk about too much because I think Herring will win.
You love Frampton as well, though. That's why.
It breaks my heart, honestly. Like, I just think it's again going to be that step too far. I think he's going up trying to win the third title in a third weight. Herring is bigger. He's more natural at the weight. He's not by any means like a level above in terms of boxing. And we've seen Frampton outbox Santa Cruz, for example, a taller man, and can do it. I don't know if it's the same Carl Frampton that we saw do that and go over to Vegas and fight Santa Cruz. I think since the fairly acrimonious split with the McGuigans, Frampton hasn't necessarily looked the same fighter, and I'm not going to say that's because of his new trainer, because of working with Jamie Moore, but I don't think he's improved under Moore. I don't know whether that is solely down to the trainer and the boxer not being as good a relationship as he did have with Shane McGuigan. Shane obviously brought him through the different levels to that world level. Obviously, it was a younger version of Carl that was winning the titles at those levels. I think he's been in some tough fights. He's not getting any older. He's probably admit himself he's past his prime, if he's brutally honest. And I think it's going to be a really tough fight. I'm surprised it's been made over this side of the pond, though. I think initially there was talk about being in America, and I'd have confidently picked Herring on points. With it being over here, I think maybe it's a little bit more competitive, and I'm not going to cast aspersions on our judging and all the rest of it. But It may be that there is just like one more roll of the dice. There's one big night left for Frampton to pick up that third world title.
That's it. He does seem to be more or less the last of that era now. Do you know what I mean? That era from sort of fight nights from like, I don't know, 10 years ago or whatever. Like, still hanging in there, and God, I'd love to see him win it. Like, I was like huge fan like yourself. He's the favourite, Frampton, and I don't know if that's with a lot of UK money going on and it now being in the UK, but he is the favourite of the bookmakers. Pretty closely priced though. He's 4 to 6 basically, 8 to 11 best price, and you've got 30 to 10 like against for Heron. So if that is what you think, then it could be worth a little tinkle. But I like the fight. I'd love to see him do it. Cement his place in history as what a fine fighter he's been over the years, man. Absolute class, like generally world class fighter. All right, he's lost a few and stuff, but like warranting in that, but that doesn't diminish his achievements at all. Like at the best of his game, he was, at the top of his game, he was class, and I'd love to see him do it. Whyte in the UK, I don't know. Like, I don't know if that's just it's easier to do over here and easier to make with whatever's going on over in the States, COVID-wise maybe, but it's in the UK. I did, and this isn't me stirring the pot or anything, but hear from, how do I word it? Someone who can be close to the Frampton camp that maybe don't get all your hopes up that it'll happen on the 27th of Feb. He just, I just heard that he wouldn't be surprised if it was pushed back a little bit, but hey, that's not gospel. That's just me chewing the fat with a friend. But it's in there. It's in the diary for now. And again, a fight. It's only fair we look at the Queensberry fights, Frank Warren fights. But looking forward to that one, 27th of Feb. Frampton, War Frampton.
Aye.
But anything else? I don't think there is.
I think we've been waffling on for quite a while. If anyone's lasted this long, they've done well.
We've got a little plug. We've got Mark Dickinson coming on the podcast tomorrow, former GB and Berkeley boxer, who's just turned over there with MTK Global. Pretty chuffed with that. He's coming on, so I'm going to speak to him tomorrow morning. We'll get that up, and we'll get this up, and as we go into another week with no boxing.
So, yeah, we'll just fill it with random content. And to be fair, we're saying that, but obviously Mark's like someone we're familiar with up here, and it'd be good to get his story out there to a national audience, which is going to happen anyway. He's as you said, turned pro with MTK. He's going to be big waves in the pro game, I have no doubt. And we'll try and get a few more interviews lined up, a few more big names, and keep filling people's boxing void as longer it goes on.
Pretty limited pickings towards the end of the month. I think we've got Angelo Leo versus Stevie Fulton next weekend over from the States, which is actually a pretty decent fight, to be honest with you. That's been rescheduled. I think Fulton had COVID. Towards the end of the month, you've got Caleb Plant against Caleb Truax, Battle of the Calebs. Before we hit that sort of matchroom schedule on the 13th ongoing. I'm sure there'll be more announcements. Like you say, I'm sure MTK's got stuff up the sleeve and Frank Warren, so I guess we'll react to them as and when, really. But
Sounds good.
Enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and I'll speak to you soon, lad.
And you too. Cheers.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.